Layoffs are increasing while job postings are decreasing, and AI is all the rage. And it's leaving a lot of people wondering whether or not there's a viable future for them in the tech space. So if you're somebody that's looking to get into the tech industry or you're somebody that's already in the fray, I'm going to try to give you a little insight of what's going on in the job market and whether or not I feel that this is a good time for the tech space. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Brian, the founder of A Life After Layoff, a former technical recruiter and a career strategist. And I've made it my mission to demystify how hiring and how careers work at major corporations. So if this kind of content interests you, make sure you hit the subscribe button. So let's talk about what's going on in the job market, specifically in the tech space, which, as you know, has been hit particularly hard when it comes to layoffs and it comes to kind of this is what I would consider to be an assault on careers. Tech has been the tip of the spear. It was the tip of the spear at the beginning of the pandemic. It was the tip of the spear and the return of the job market. And it's been the tip of the spear as things whiplash back to being crappy again. So here we are 5 years after the peak of the pandemic, looking at the job market and seeing, is the software development and technical space still viable as a career option? So let's head over and look at the data and let's talk through some strategies that you can use if you're in the tech space or looking to break into the tech space to try to position yourself to be a stronger candidate. First things first, let's look at the most recent data released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics on total jobs in the market. Now, this isn't specifically just tech. This is all non-farm payrolls. And you can see the most recent data is pretty abysmal. We only hit, I think it was like 22,000 total new jobs on payroll, which is a massive miss. They were looking at potentially 79 to 80,000 and it came in at 22. So you can see the downward trend going all the way back to the pandemic and then the height of the market coming back down. We are at one of the most difficult job markets since the pandemic. And furthermore, June was further revised downward. In fact, it was the first negative month since December of 2020. That's at the height of the pandemic when things were going crazy. So it doesn't really set us up for a strong job market. But looking at the tech market specifically, these are the numbers that go all the way back to January of 2024. The good news is that we do see a downward trend in the total number of layoffs, meaning that we're not seeing these mass layoff events like we were seeing back in 2024 and parts of 2025. But the biggest outlier, it's January of 2024, we saw 34,000. April, we saw 22,000. August, we saw 26,000. Going into the earlier part of this year, February, we had 16,000. April, we had nearly 25,000 people laid off in tech. And July was kind of a big number too, 16,200 or 16,300. August obviously was a lot better, and I think overall we're trending downward, but is that a question of things are improving, or is it an indicator that there's just simply not that many people left to lay off? So we look at the total tech layoffs, it might tell a little bit of a more interesting story. So we look at the tech layoffs since COVID, we're going all the way back to 2021. We saw the pickup, and then we saw a massive decrease in the second quarter. This is the total number of people. You can see almost nobody was laid off from I'd say the third quarter, fourth quarter of 2020, all the way through 2022. And this corresponds with the hiring boom that happened. Obviously, tech was on the front end of that. That's why we could see so many people on payroll during this period of time. This was a great time to be in the tech space for about a year and let's just say a year and a half or so. But then things turned drastically. So it's like quickly hired and then quickly fired. You can see how bad 2023 truly was when you look at the broader context. Fourth quarter 2022, 85,000 people. Peaked in first quarter of 2023, almost 170,000 people. And then it continues down for the next quarter, 46,000. But then you can see a steady downward trend. Now, again, is this because the tech space has improved? Or is it because there's simply not that many people left to lay off? I don't know, but we're going to take a look at some of the job posting numbers because I think that will probably tell a more accurate story. But nonetheless, There are less people right now in 2025 getting laid off than certainly 2024 and 2023, but certainly way higher than we saw at the beginning of the very beginning of the pandemic and certainly through the peak of the pandemic. But we certainly have seen our share of tech layoffs in 2025. 100,000 plus. We have Intel, Microsoft, Meta. A lot of these companies are starting to talk about AI and its impact on their workforce and how they're looking at efficiency. So they're starting to become more vocal about this. So it's something that we should at least keep in the back of our minds, something that we want to stay in front of. Pay attention to it. If at very minimum, just make sure that you are aware of it so that you don't get caught off guard or with your head in the sand. Whether or not it's going to actually impact you in your own career is another thing, but at least be aware of it. So let's jump into the job postings themselves, the data. So this is job postings on Indeed. Now, there's not data for LinkedIn, or I probably would be covering that, but Indeed is a decent litmus test because a lot of companies do advertise on Indeed, but it's not the automatic for, I'd say, the technology jobs. A lot of companies have agreements with LinkedIn to publish jobs on there through packages where they automatically get posted. So I'd say LinkedIn is probably a more accurate look at the job market with, fake jobs aside. I know there's a lot of issues with that, but LinkedIn is probably a better issue. Like when I was recruiting in the tech space, we were not advertising on Indeed at all. We were using LinkedIn and some other places, but primarily I would say LinkedIn was kind of like the standard. It was like that was the main place that you would put it, and then you would try a few other places. But Indeed was generally not one of them. But it still is a good litmus test for total job postings, because I know a lot of companies do it, but we're just going to have a little bit of a grain of salt when we look at the data through Indeed. So when we look at the data, it's a 100 multiplier. So how I'm interpreting this is this number says 98.93. That would be 9,800 new jobs posted on Indeed for that particular day, so July 13th. So as we see across the board, corresponding with the job market improving, we saw a lot of jobs being posted, peaked at, let's just say roughly 183. So that'd be 18,000 jobs on May the 7th. And as we see, it kind of is slowly and decreasing down to, let's just say roughly about 10,000 job postings per day through 2025, which is still way above what we saw in the pandemic or the height of the pandemic. You had 3,900 job postings. Here we have, again, about 11,000, 10,000, somewhere in that ballpark. Now, this is not telling us the part-time versus full-time, fractional work, low-quality jobs. So we're not taking that into account. It's kind of a separate thing. But the total number of jobs posted is actually higher than it was during that period of time. And if you go back to pre-pandemic, back as early, it's about, let's just say the baseline is about 10,000. So we're about where we were, actually slightly higher than where we were back then. Let's take a look at the developers in the United States. We can see back in the peak of the pandemic, we had about 6,400 jobs posted total. This is now total jobs posted for software developers at the peak of the negative part of the pandemic. So 64.5. Again, this is a 100 multiplier. And you can see the job market for software developers went skyrocketing. And the total number at its absolute peak in February of 2022 was 232. So 23,200 total software development jobs posted in the United States on Indeed. And then as fast as it went up, it actually seems like the decrease has been even faster. And we can see it basically plummets back down to, into 2024 at 73. So again, we were at the peak, we were at 64 was the lowest. The average was around, say, 100. Before then, pre-pandemic, this seems like the age of the dinosaurs now, but pre-pandemic, it was around, I'll just say 100, so 10,000. Now we're seeing it back down below that threshold. It looked like we really got below that threshold in May of 2023 is when it went to where it was before the pandemic. And now since then, it's been a steady decrease in the total number of jobs. And we can see As we're moving through this chart into 2025, it's now 68. So again, the lowest was 64 back in the height of the pandemic. In 2024, we were basically at the pandemic levels. But when we get into 2025, the numbers are starting to decrease even more. And now we've hit as low as in May, 60.74. It's bounced back very slightly, but it's starting to look like the new norm is now 6,500 total jobs. And again, these aren't necessarily high quality jobs like they were at the peak of the pandemic where people were seeing these massive offers, but rather a lot of these jobs are what I would consider to be lower quality. And at the same time, companies are looking at efficiency. So the entry level or near entry level jobs are probably the ones most at risk right now for being replaced by AI tools because they can do the lower level work. They can do the mundane coding that a more senior developer probably gets bogged down with. And in theory, the senior developer gets to focus on the more strategic based initiatives, maybe a little bit more focus on architecture, etc. But what that leaves is a lot of the mundane work is being replaced by AI tools. And unfortunately, again, those entry level folks are finding it to be much more difficult to get a start in their careers. And there is a real concern about bench strength. I look at it and say, if you're not training any of the young folks coming into the market, how are you ever going to have architect level software developers in the future? You have to train them somewhere. Eventually, those people are going to retire and move off into the sunset. You got to have to replace them. And if we're eliminating an entire job classification or job level, that's a real serious concern that I have for the long term. Now, let's look beyond just the the software development space and look at the IT operations. Is it just software? Or is it operations? Well, the chart is showing a similar pattern. In the beginning of the pandemic, this is as far back as the data goes, so it's a little about the same amount of time. So 65,000 or 6,500 total jobs at the peak of the beginning of the pandemic. Again, same baseline. The chart's very similar on this is IT operations and help desk job postings. Again, we can see it's a steady decrease, and it does not look like we've hit the bottom yet. Now, we are not back to where we're slightly above where we were at the height of the pandemic, but the job postings are really getting to the point of it being at the peak pandemic levels. The problem is there's not a whiplash effect that we're likely to see another increase in the market. At this point in time, I just feel like employers realized that they laid off too many people. Things were in limbo. We didn't know when the market was turning back on. That everything was shut down. We weren't shipping anything. There was chip shortages. So they laid off a lot of people in anticipation of it. And then we saw this massive wave of hiring to hire back a lot of the people that they had let go and to try to play catch up. Once they played catch up, they realized that potentially overhired. And then these at the same time, you have the ChatGPT being announced. It's kind of like this perfect storm. And the perfect storm is hitting the tech space across the board pretty hard, as you can see. It's just there's no sign, there's no end in sight as of right now. It just continues to go down. So what are the rules in decline? Well, the reports that we're seeing are the sharpest decrease in the number of jobs is going to be front-end developers and back-end developers. Then quality assurance testers, database and technical support specialists. So these are the jobs that are under the most pressure right now. And they're suggesting in this article AI systems taking over repetitive or standardized tasks. That might be one of the reasons. I'm sure there's several reasons as to why these roles in particular are being hit hard. Now, if you're trying to pivot out of software development or you're looking to get a start in the tech space, these might be some opportunities. Machine learning is a very hot area. Obviously, AI product managers. If you're interested in getting into the tech space, I think prompt engineering, AI product, and machine learning is the place to be. Data scientists are being hit by AI, but if you niche down and specialize in AI model training, that's an option. Now, there's a little bit of an ethical issue with that. If you're training the model, are you training the model to eventually replace you? It's like even with software developers who are writing AI code to train their AI models, like the ChatGPTs of the world, etc. If you're working for ChatGPT and you're building these technologies out, is there an ethical question there? I sometimes wonder that if you're building software to replace yourself and an entire job segment, I don't know. But sure enough, companies are also asking this question. The next major area is AI ethics and compliance. So if you're interested in that question, that might be a place for you to start looking, especially if you're in a leadership career path. Ethics and compliance officers are going to be a big thing, and it's going to impact quite a lot of the labor market going forward. I'm doing more research right now into what's going to happen long term, whether or not AI is a good or a bad thing for careers, and what happens if AI replaces everybody, which there is a decent chance that AI could impact almost every single job, including especially recruiters and people in the human resources space. But what happens when everything gets displaced and people no longer have incomes, can't buy the things that these companies are developing their products for? Becomes a really interesting and fascinating question. It's something that I guess we will find out in the not so distant future. So that's what's going on in the broader job market. But I want to talk for a few minutes on how to differentiate yourself in this space. If I'm moving into the tech space, these are some of the things that I'm going to try to focus on. First things first, focus on one of the core areas that's actually growing, that's in demand. We talked about some of them earlier in this video. So what I would do is go to LinkedIn and go to this job search fields, type in a few keywords for the job type you're interested in, and see how many total jobs pop up. And then play around with a few different titles, to a few different variations, a few different subfields, and see which type of job has the most job postings. So that'll tell you what's in most demand. Then I would take the same keywords and then put them into the search bar as well, and then click on the people tab and see how many people are coming up with those titles. You kind of get to see how many jobs total there are and what your potential competition is. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, there's a lot of fake jobs on LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. There's not really another better way to do this. So you're gonna have to use a little bit of a grain of salt. I don't believe the reports that are saying up to 70% of jobs are fake. I do believe there are some fake jobs, but I don't believe that it's that widespread, because it costs companies money to publish these jobs. So that's one way to do it. I just make sure that I'm focusing on a job type that is actually in demand and there isn't a ton of competition. Second thing I would do is look at my competitive advantage compared to all these people. Is there a certain skill or keyword or experience that I can really leverage to make myself a more desirable candidate on the market? So you have to identify what your differentiator is. We talked about this in previous videos. You can't be an average candidate. Otherwise, you can see what your competition is. And the third thing I would do is I would probably double down on the most emerging technologies in the space. So like the AI question is a big thing that's being asked in industry right now. Companies are actively asking the question, how can they make their workforce more efficient? And they're looking at these AI tools, right, wrong, or indifferent. So if it was me, I'm just saying if it was me, I would look at, can I be the expert in that particular technology in my job type? And I would go full force at it. Because the fact of the matter is that in current state, maybe these tools will not replace people wholesale, but we're not far off from a time where these tools will evolve to the point that they could potentially replace people wholesale. But they're going to replace the people who are not doing what I'm suggesting right now. So you can be on the forefront of it if you actually implement this strategy. So those are the things that I would absolutely be doing. And of course, do all the normal stuff. Make sure that you got a good resume. Make sure that your networking, your LinkedIn is on point. Make sure that you got a brand to speak of. Like all of those things are just best practices. But that's what I would start doing if I was you, and trying to get into the tech space or trying to carve out my niche if I'm already there, because it's only going to continue to get more competitive. I do feel that there is still a viable career path in the tech space, but it requires you to do something different than you used to. It's just not going to cut it anymore to put your hands up in the air and say, my experience should speak for itself, because that's just not reality. That's not where the job market has moved. If you need more help with that, again, check out my website, alifeafterlayoff.com. It's loaded with tips and tricks, all from an insider's perspective. And I share my deepest and most intimate knowledge in the form of training courses. I talk about how to write resumes. I talk about how to interview with strategy. I talk about how to approach your career with strategy, and how to build networks, and how to leverage LinkedIn. So if you need any help with your job search, you can check those out. I also offer some limited private one-on-one coaching where I teach people how to approach their career, their job search with more conviction and authority. How to get unstuck, how to move up in your career, how to get started in a new career in tech and in other industries. So if you're struggling and you want some more private one-on-one help, you can reach me through my website for that as well. Anyway, hopefully you found this to be insightful. Let me know what your thoughts are on the tech space. Is it as difficult as I'm describing in this video? And what are your experiences? Leave a comment and let me know. As always, appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.